Welcome to this edition of Simsbury School News. My name is Dominique Avery. Today is our annual show on the Simsbury School System budget for the next fiscal year. The $69 million budget was approved by the Board of Education at their February 28th meeting. That budget included a 2.5% increase over last year. But that increase is not the biggest issue this year. This is an unusual year, and our biggest issue is the fact that the state faces a $1.4 billion deficit. And the governor's proposed budget cuts education funds to towns like Simsbury, where the budget would be cut over $4 million if Governor Malloy's projected costs go through. If that were to happen, it could have a major impact on our schools and or a major property tax increase for our taxpayers. But in the face of these drastic numbers, the school administration has remained relatively calm, including my guests, Matt Curtis and Burke LeClaire, the school's business manager, Matt, of course, the superintendent of schools. Matt, I have to say that I watched the Board of Education meeting in which you presented your figures and the discussion, and I admired your calm discussion, and there was no no hysteria, no excitement. At the same time, the West Hartford superintendent of schools was saying we're going to have to cut 200 teachers, and it was really kind of scary. If I recall correctly, you said while it was not a severe situation, you didn't want to overreact with cuts to the budget if it turned out we don't have to.
Right.
What made you so calm? Are you always so calm?
Well, I think it's a couple things, Dominique. We're in a community that supports education, number one. We had a three-board meeting, a conversation at the Board of Finance once the governor's budget came out to get some input, have some conversation about how we move forward in this complex situation. So it was at that meeting that we really talked about not overreacting too soon. I think people recognize that the governor's budget as it stands, while there are differing opinions, don't believe that's going to be the finalized budget. We also recognize, as you alluded to, the tremendous financial strain that the state's under. So whatever the situation is going to be, we know it's not going to be net positive to a community like Simsbury. But we kind of agreed to wait until some of that becomes a little more clear with the appropriations numbers, hopefully coming out at the end of April. That we would recalibrate where we are and kind of move forward. But
let me just interrupt you, just for people who are not, this is sort of inside baseball. Sure. The governor presents the budget and it goes to the legislature's appropriations committee, and they have hearings and workshops and all kinds of things. Then they come up with their own budget, and during a long session, their deadline is at the end of April. I think this year it's April 27th.
So one place we're a little more fortunate than some surrounding communities, West Hartford, you gave an example, Glastonbury's or another. Our charter allows for a longer duration of us to move the number forward to referendum. So we can buy a little time to try to get as much accurate information as we can. And those conversations are starting. We had a pretty productive conversation with the Board of Finance last Tuesday night, where both Lisa Hevner and I had an opportunity to present our budgets to them. Had a good solid Q&A, and I think then talked a little bit more about the reality of what the governor's proposal would be. And I think that's an important impact to talk about. You talked about $4.3 million, which between the different line items, which are really the educational cost share grant, and potentially taking on the burden of teacher pension, which has long been a system managed by the state of Connecticut, which was a surprise to us all, what that would do kind of all in from a financial aspect to the mill rate. And it would put the mill rate over 40, close to 41. So, I think that all the boards involved know that that's not a tenable situation. So we have to put a plan together to kind of look forward and start having hard conversations. And, there are three ways to look at it, right? There's the operating costs and what the operating can do to provide some relief. There's always an analysis of the town reserve levels, which have been relatively healthy, to say, can we find some relief there? And then there's the fact of raising taxes, which we haven't done in several years. We've been fortunate. So I think that's the conversation moving forward. We got some guidance at that last meeting, Lisa and I, so the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen, about some different scenarios, one of which being, start thinking about, between the two budgets, a reduction of $1 million and what that would look like to programs and services.
So maybe we should talk about that.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that? What would you do to cut $1 million?
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about it. I haven't played that out in detail
All
to
right.
the Board of Ed yet. I mean, that happens tonight. But the reality is it will have an impact, varying degrees of impact. They will be positions. They will be people. We will try very hard to stay away from immediately moving up class size and look at other elements of the operation first. Because when we developed our budget at 2.48%, we were already, we do have some new staffing requests in there, but we were already looking at enrollment and plan to reduce 5.5 positions. So we've already kind of taken some of the wiggle room out of those areas. So our initial plan wouldn't be to go right back there, for example, and make your kindergarten classes 26. We try really hard to avoid that. But those are the challenges inevitably you come across as you cut away at services.
So you can feel actually safe, fairly safe in discussing what you're going to present or talk to the Board of Ed tonight, because this is not going to air until after that meeting. It's at least a week later. So
Yep.
you can actually share, and nobody's going to tell them what
Yeah.
you said tonight. I'm not going to go on the radio
Sure. So
or tweet.
yeah. So we're looking at showing some examples of what it would take, and Burke always has the list. He's good. To take a budget from 2.48 to close to 2%. So it's a little over $300,000. So there are various things. Where we would start is really some conversation about the new requests, the new staffing requests that we have, and really do an analysis of, is it the time to bring on new positions? We had a request in there for a social worker that our elementary principals have advocated for, as well as a math coach, because we're going to be implementing a new math program. I believe both positions, when we talk to the Board of Ed tonight, will receive quite a bit of Q&A. I know there'll be some concerns, taking those off the table, but I think that is a reasonable place to start, because you're not eliminating a current position. We're analyzing non-certified staffing levels, so we would look to have some conversation about some paraprofessional positions there, some electives at Simsbury High School. We've talked candidly about the fact, I think one of our biggest challenges as enrollment now starts to move down at Simsbury High School, we have a great elective offering. It's what makes us different. But what do those enrollments in classes look like? So a conversation about some of those different programs, and put the data on the table about what some of those class sizes look like and whether we can afford to continue to staff them at full levels. So those, between those different categories are where we'll probably have our conversation tonight to get it started.
So people always, various curmudgeons out there always are saying, look at your sports department at the high school. Can't you cut there? You have so many offerings.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of, what you're talking about, electives? Is that the kind of thing you're talking? No.
I think, depending on how far down we're kind of forced to take a look, I think you have to look at all aspects of the organization. So at some level, athletics will be in the conversation, and enrollments are always a piece of it. You can always look at pay for play. There are different ways to try to look at revenue and look at costs. But I think it would be fair to say that our Board of Education, in a significant reduction scenario, would look from myself and my team to really look at all categories, meaning all levels of the education system, certified, non-certified, and be thoughtful about what we present.
Okay, so now there's another complaint that I bring up almost every year, and that is people on the outside who are conservative and sort of older and do not see the need for all the administrative positions we have. Is that a possibility? I don't want to freak anybody out, but is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think we need to have logical discussions about everything, And again, when we talk about an $800,000 cut to $1 million cut, I don't want to say that that's a best case scenario, but it could be worse, right? I mean, in that quite honestly, in that calculation that the Board of Finance gave us the guidance, they were utilizing it just in the model, $800,000 in reserves. I don't know how comfortable the members of the Board of Finance are in doing that in a difficult time. So there are a lot of variables. So I think there'll be a lot of conversation about those things. And we've talked other years about, administration levels and where we sit and what those responsibilities are and how they have changed tremendously with mandates over the past several years.
So the first thing that's going to, the public is going to have a number of opportunities to participate. Number one, there's public audience at all these various meetings. But then there is a hearing on, I believe it's April 6th, Thursday, April 6th?
Yes, it's a Thursday. It's 6 p.m. at the high school amphitheater. Which is our typical location. For, and certainly it is going to give an opportunity for us to show, what our initial needs are that we've articulated, and we know it won't be the last hearing because of this, process that is being followed this year, which is not unlike last year, where it was not to the same magnitude, but we worked with Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen to extend the time frame to get some better information about state revenue variances. And last year we had a June referendum, so it appears to be that's going to be the second straight year. So the public will definitely have opportunities following that public hearing, further Board of Education meetings, and then a second public hearing.
So now those public hearings and the referendum the last few years with no tax increases have been kind of sleepy affairs. With, I think I counted last year certainly less than a dozen. I don't think there were even 10 people who spoke at the public hearing at the high school. Do you anticipate it will be different this year? I
do. I think, every day you pick up the newspaper, you see a different school district profiled and the magnitude of what they're going through. So we're no different from that. We're a well-educated community. We have, as you mentioned, we have a great school system we're proud of, and we also have a higher mill rate that we need to be very cognizant of. So I think that brings out folks on both sides to share their thoughts on things. And even if down the road we're talking about potential reductions, that people have an opportunity to give feedback on those as well, will be important. So I would anticipate with the situation at the state level that we will get much more input than we have in prior years.
So one of the things when we were talking a little bit about the governor's cuts, one of the things that he did, and you mentioned that earlier, was he suddenly said he was turning back to the towns their contribution, a third of the contributions to the teacher pension.
Correct.
Which to me was
sending us a bill for essentially a third of this cost for the very first time, and passing down a cost that had never been borne by local governments.
Correct.
Right.
I mean, I thought it was so outrageous.
It hasn't happened yet, but it's certainly been the largest conversation starter, I would say, for...
So of the 4.3 million you talked about, that's about 3.6. So
that's
that puts
huge,
into perspective, when we're talking about a complex situation, if that were to change, the unknown is, would they take the money from somewhere else? Would it now come from the town side? What are the other variables? And I think that's what has, everybody a little anxious about the process this year.
Yeah, I mean, to make that kind of change overnight without any warning, without any preparation, to me is just, totally outrageous. I can't see how they could possibly do that.
Large-scale changes like that, you usually talk about a reform initiative, and you get input, and you would scale something over time.
Right, exactly, and which is what they've been trying to do with the entire education budget unsuccessfully. So I'm not sure that they're going to know. So tell me what you have done so far to play a role in what the budget's going to look like. Have you gone to hearings? Did you submit testimony?
We did submit testimony that was signed by the first selectman and the chairman of the Board of Education. Definitely about those one of the two key factors we just spoke about, that teacher pension portion. We also submitted legislation or comments on legislation in regard to some of the special education funding changes. So what they actually propose to do is give us give less ECS education cost sharing monies to the town, but also taking a portion of that and creating a new special education grant, which actually would be more monies than we have currently been funded. So we're trying to stay through our various professional organizations. I've been meeting with our business managers group to try to stay on top of testimony that is relevant to the financial details. And I know Matt and the Board of Ed are looking at other bills that are out there, because there's other things happening besides just the budget in this session that we have to be concerned about that could have a cost impact.
So you didn't actually sit there in the hearing and stay late into the night. You just submitted testimony?
We did.
Well, it just so happened that we had a budget meeting the night of this one key hearing. So I was choosing to go to our Board of Finance or go to that. So we submitted some written testimony.
I mean, one thing when this initially came out that I thought made a lot of sense, and I don't think the different boards can forget about it as we move through. We sent out a joint letter to the community, Lisa, myself, and Rob Pomeroy, the chair of the Board of Finance, kind of highlighting the governor's budget and recognizing the challenges, and also recognizing that, more important than ever, and we have worked successfully together, that all parties work together on this to recognize the challenge we're trying to solve. This didn't come upon us because one of the boards came out with an outlandish, unreasonable budget request, right? It came upon us because of what's going on at the state level. And while you look at the bottom line impact of that, and that's what can cause tremendous angst in people, we need to recognize what we're trying to solve here and how we're trying to mitigate this challenge so that you don't end up with what's really difficult is an increased mill rate that has people frustrated and decreased value of your school system. Right. And I think that's what I'm most worried about as a superintendent,
So can we touch on one question about why this is happening now? I mean, the governor said he's reallocating state funds from wealthier districts to poor districts and remaking the formula for determining state funding. And I once asked you, I recall quite unfairly, if you didn't feel guilty that we have so much. I'm going to ask you that again, because now he is actually trying to change the formula so that he's taking away from very wealthy districts. We have a lot of wealthy people, but I don't think we're in that same category because we don't have enough of an economic base, especially with Hartford gone.
Right.
So, I mean, but you live in a community also that is. So do you guys ultimately think that he is trying to do the right thing? I mean, is this?
I think some adjustments in the cost share formula are reasonable. It's been such a hybrid for so long that it's hard for people to really understand the basis of it. You look at a community like ours and we receive roughly $6 million, where Avon receives under $1 million and Farmington receives about $1 million because of their ability to generate tax revenue outside of households. So we're a community that stands to get hurt a little bit more by this change. What's interesting, as communities started to work through this, even the 30 districts that received more dollars, and it's only, I think, 30 statewide, as a result of the ECS shifts, lose overall because of the teacher pension.
Right.
So it's really a situation where it's hard to separate the pieces because the net result is everybody is in the hole. And I guess that's my kind of takeaway from it. It's hard to just focus on the educational cost share, Dominique, because to the state budget, it's dollar neutral. It's not a big player in the state budget in their development because it's a shift. And it's a shift that's creating a tremendous amount of political angst, but it's not saving them any money. And the teacher pension is the much more significant piece that people are grappling with about where are we going with that. And could we creatively find ways to reduce cost and do things to mitigate educational cost share? Well, a piece of it, we couldn't take the whole burden like some of these communities are. So
this the whole idea of the teacher pension, maybe if you guys could explain the fact that teachers are not on Social Security, that they have their own. Could you explain that a little? For a lot of people don't know that, and
Want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the state system is a portable system. So if you're a teacher in any district, it's the same system, and you can go from town to town or district to district. And so the state has always managed that pension, unlike the town pensions that we have for non-certified Board of Ed staff and other town staff. We don't control, what comes out, and we don't control the amount of funding. We've been very conscious to make sure that we, are going to be able to fully fund all that's owed in the defined benefit plans. In fact, our plans are all closed on the Board of Ed side for non-certified staff. There's no new defined benefit members. It's anybody hired now as a defined contribution plan. So the state's plan has the same sort of actuarial calculations that they have to look at, but unfortunately they have not funded it. They've funded other things, and now it's gotten so large that they're realizing that without pushing some of this burden to us, it's just going to be harder and harder for them to do that. But as you said, teachers don't have social security. They just have the Medicare portion that comes out. So those are unique aspects that are handled on a state level, and as we certainly know, something has to happen to keep the system going, just like the other state defined benefit plans for state workers. Those have their own funding issues, and there's not been a lot of conversation about that.
So Matt mentioned that you've been in some discussions with other towns and how towns are going to deal with this. I think I've heard that that's one of the town organizations, maybe it was COST, I'm not sure, has threatened to sue the state if they go ahead and do that.
I did read that they found a legal opinion that they felt would help to dispute that. I don't have any read on whether that would be successful. I think the legislators are certainly going to be listening to their local leaders and hearing that this is a pretty big issue of concern, and we would hope that there would be more of a plan to be able to figure out how this, if it's going to change, not just to have it suddenly handed to you without any chance to prepare for it.
And I think the biggest challenge, we'll go back to where we started, is you have this huge burden put on the town. How do you address that within your process to not create hysteria if you believe that might not be the net outcome, but you're also prepared along the way, and it is a delicate balance. So I think we've been as thoughtful as we can about that, but I think, we're close to certainly we got some guidance from the Board of Finance and need to be prepared to look at some things, and I think all the boards recognize that we need to be a part of this puzzle to figure it out. But, I'd rather handle it that way, Dominique, than create a doomsday scenario for people with deep cuts to the system to find out that it changed and come back and say, sorry, I didn't need to do that. That just from a process standpoint, I think is how we're choosing to address that, and I still think it makes the most sense.
So we just have a couple of minutes left. Just let's outline what's going to happen now. We are recording this on March 28th. You have a board meeting tonight where you're going to lay out some of what you already told us, because
Correct.
this isn't going to run until afterwards. And then we have a
April 6th public hearing. And that would be, they moved forward our original budgets because they felt from a process standpoint have an opportunity to talk about that. So we'll have that public forum and receive input, and I would think that we'll certainly get some feedback there. We have a board meeting on the 28th, which I think we would probably, I haven't gotten total direction from my board, but show what the remainder of that potential reduction list could look like to 800,000. And then we have a May, what's the exact date for the second public hearing, Burke? Is that mid-May?
They haven't formally set it, but they've shown a tentative date of May 23rd. So prior to that date, we know we need to have a meeting where we really look at, hey, what's our new target, so that we can come up with public presentations in time for that hearing.
And hopefully the appropriations will give us some kind of clear direction, although it's not finalized, that the three boards can kind of look at different scenarios and have those conversations.
So I actually learned one new fact, and well, I learned a lot of new facts, but that we have the ability to change our budget referendum day, which like some other towns don't have. I didn't know that.
Right. Yeah, and that's helpful in a situation like this. We did that last year as well, when there was a little bit of uncertainty on a smaller scale. But some other communities need to pass a budget by the end of March, so they need to almost play this worst-case scenario game, which I know is difficult on them.
Right. Now, what happens if the legislature does not reach a budget agreement by their June 7th deadline and they go into special session? Then you won't be able to vote, or what happens then?
They won't have passed a budget regardless. So it really doesn't change the scenario. We know that just like last year, there was an understanding of where the shortfall might happen. A target was set, and we know we have reserves and other methods of.
Okay, so there are people on social media now who are saying that your taxes could go up 8.3%.
Right.
That's not likely to happen.
Correct.
I don't think there's a palette for that.
Right. That was an illustration of a worst case with no reserves in governor's budget, and certainly no further cuts, which we've all been clear on there will be.
Okay, but we will have a tax increase this year, unlike the last 3 years.
Right.
And we knew that was happening this year because of
as we came into it,
because of some other factors.
Well, I thank both of you for being
reassuring
and for sharing this information with us. We have run out of time. I'd like to thank everybody here at SCTV Behind the Scenes for their help in getting the show on the air, and cameraman Sam Davidson. And thanks especially to you, Matt Curtis and Burke LeClaire. And finally, thank you for joining us. If you missed any part of this show, you can find it on demand at simsburytv.org. A reminder, all Board of Education meetings air live on SCTV on Comcast or Xfinity Channel 95 on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of the month. Finally, we'd love it if you also liked us on Facebook, SCTV. I'm Dominique Avery. See you next time for Simsbury School News. Since 1984, SCTV has been the place to turn in Simsbury to watch local government in action. But we're more than local government and school meetings. SCTV is the only place where you can check out all the candidates in local elections. We have high school sports and exercise classes. Other shows keep you up on health, finance, poetry, music, and Simsbury hot topics. Now we need your help. Simsbury Community TV is embarking on a major capital fundraising campaign to bring SCTV into the 21st century. We've received a generous grant from the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, but now we must match it. We want everyone to watch us on TV or on our website, but even if you never do, please help so that we can continue to keep your government open and you informed. Someday, when there's a crisis, you will want SCTV to be there.
Hi, my name is Charles Wolfe, President of Charles J. Wolfe Associates in Simsbury, and I hope you'll join me in supporting SCTV. Since 1984, your connection to your town, your schools, and your government.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.